Alrighty, so today we're going to talk about FC Cincinnati in the Moving Forward series episode. And apologies if my voice sounds not up to par because it's kind of lost a little bit of steam in the last couple of days. But, for Cincinnati, they kind of had a very similar season to what we saw with St. Louis City winning the Western Conference. Cincinnati won the Eastern Conference. They won the Supporters Shield with the best record in MLS and a record breaking regular season in their franchise history. But unfortunately, just like St. Louis City losing in the playoffs against their hated rival in heartbreaking fashion, the same goes for Cincinnati, losing to their biggest rival in the Eastern Conference Final. And then to add insult to injury, they also saw their most hated rival eventually win it all and winning MLS Cup 2023. But nevertheless, they did finish with a 29-5 record and finished with 69 points. Nice. They scored 57 goals while allowing 39 goals with plus 18 goal differential. The 57 goals that they scored, that is definitely a little bit low for a team that win the Supporters Shield. I mean, usually when you see teams that win the Supporters Shield, they score like at least 60 plus goal, and they always have like the best attack and the best defense in the league. But when you look at the Cincinnati team, especially in the early days when this team basically went on an incredible run, like they basically led the pack from the beginning. They only lost once in the first 4 months of the season, and that even though those wins weren't necessarily impressive. In fact, it was kind of a first 4 months where most of their games were kind of grind fest with them grinding out 1-0 wins and so forth, and that's kind of the reason why they didn't score too much goal. But that being said, I mean, if you are a team like Cincinnati, and that I'll mention this multiple time in this moving forward series episode, this is a team that a couple years ago, I think some of the performance and some of the result that they got may not be the case what we saw last couple of years before the pre-Chris Albright and Pat Nolan day, when they always had that losing mentality. And that, again, just full credit has to be with those two guys that have really changed the culture and changed the mentality of this team in just these 2 short years. They finished first in the Eastern Conference, as I mentioned, and they won the Supporters Shield in 2023, but unfortunately, they did lose to the Columbus Crew in the Eastern Conference Final. The head coach is Pat Nolan. He's been there since 2022, and the chief soccer officer is Chris Albright. He's been there since 2021. Two of the names that arguably has been the best at their job ever since they come in. And I think Pat Nolan, of course, winning the coach of the year. And I don't know if there is a GM of the year award in MLS, but I think Chris Albright would have definitely won that if there is that sort of award in MLS. Now, in terms of top goal scorer, it's Lucho Acosta. He's finished with 17 goals, followed by Brandon Vasquez with 8 goals, Don Bacci with 5 goals, Ariel Barria with 5 goals, and Aaron Bupenza with 5 goals. So, this is the team that, again, last season, they definitely scored more goals than they did last year. And that last year, I remember they did had two guys that had double-digit goal scoring. It wasn't the case this year, though. You did have Lucho Acosta with 17 goals and was definitely in contention of winning the Golden Boot. Now, in terms of top assist leader, Lucho Acosta also on the top assist leader. I mean, that's not a surprise. He's always been the top assist leader for the Cincinnati team with 14 assists, followed by Barrial with 9 assists, Wobodo with 5 assists, Brandon Vasquez with 4 assists, and then Don Baji with 3 assists to round up the top 5 assist leader for this FC Cincinnati team. Now, when you look at the last five season, again, this is basically just to show you how in those 2 seasons, Pat Nolan and Chris Albright has completely changed the fortune of this Cincinnati team, because in those 2 seasons that they have been in charge of this team, this year they finished with a 29-5 record and finished with 69 points. Again, nice. In 2022, they finished with a 12, 13-9 record and finished with 49 points and make the playoffs for the very first time. But before that, before both Pat Nolan and Chris Albright kind of team up each other to take over this team from Cincinnati or take over this team in Cincinnati from the Philadelphia Union. Yeah, it was nothing but misery for the Cincinnati team in their life in MLS. They finished with a dismal 4-8-22 record with 20 points. In 2020, they finished with one of the lowest points total and MLS team has ever finished, albeit, you got to put a little bit of an asterisk because it was a COVID shortened season. And you could argue that the 2021 season is even worse in terms of points total, because that's over 34 games, unlike here where it is over just a 23 game season. But even then, they finished with a 4-4 and 15 record and only finished with 16 points. Mind you, two of those wins came in the MLS's back tournament group stage kind of match, which those group stage match did count for the regular season standings. So yeah, that I've also mentioned before in those moving forward series episode where that was kind of the highlights for this FC Cincinnati team last season. And then in 2019, they finished in their first ever season with a 6-6 and 22 season and finished with 24 points. And I already mentioned that is considered one of the worst points total a team has in MLS history, right up there in terms of Chivas USA with the worst expansion season that a team has ever had. Now, in terms of average attendance, 23,000 or not 23,000, 25,367 is their average attendance. That's good for fifth in the league. I mean, Cincinnati, they're pretty much sold out every single game ever since TQL Stadium was built, and especially this season too, with the hype around this team is at an all-time high, and that's going to continue heading into to next season. I mean, Cincinnati has some of the best supporters in the league, and TKO Stadium in a big match has some of the best atmosphere in the league, and it's no surprise them finish in the top five in terms of attendance, and that stadium is pretty much packed every single game. Now, in terms of MVP, it's Lucho Acosta because he did win this thing called the Landon Donovan MVP award this year. So I mean, it's pretty obvious that he's got to be the MVP of this team if he's the MVP of the whole league in general. Now, in terms of disappointment, this might be a little bit harsh, but I'm gonna actually go with Brendan Vasquez mainly because you look at this team and the record breaking regular season that they had. I mean, there really wasn't any players that you can say on this team kind of underperform and had a disappointing season. I mean, you maybe could argue Matt Miazga because of his antics that he had in the playoffs, which we'll talk about how that might have cost Cincinnati chances of going all the way to MLS Cup and winning the whole competition. But I had to go with Brandon Vasquez mainly because after an incredible season that he had last year, scoring double-digit goal, you would think that he would basically add that total and score another double-digit goals. But no, he really struggled throughout the season. He started the season really slow, and even though eventually he did pick it up as the season goes along, he didn't really hit the hype that we saw last year. And this is maybe an example of what we see a guy that when you see a player that had an incredible season, it's always going to be tough to try and to replicate that in the second season. But that's also where that's kind of the thing that you need to do if you want to be a good player, and especially maybe a guy that could be the future number nine of this U.S. men's national team. Consider, Vasquez has been a guy that a lot of people say that this should be the guy that should be carrying the number nine shirt for this U.S. men's national team. But unfortunately, this season definitely didn't look like it with the way that he didn't contribute as much as what we saw last season, and now obviously he's now moving on to CF Monterrey with Rayados in Liga MX, and it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to do in that league, and especially with a team like Rayados, considered to be one of the best team in Liga MX for the past couple of years. And then eventually we'll see whether if he does do well in Liga MX, that's when we potentially could see him make his jump to Europe, because there's been talks that he was going to make his jump to Europe this season as well. Brentford was one of those teams I mentioned before that they were going to sell him off to there, and that's going to be the team that he's going to make the jump to Europe. But ultimately, he's now in Liga MX, and it's going to be interesting to see how he's going to do. Now, in terms of young player to watch, I couldn't really come up with anyone. I mean, if there's one player you could say that maybe is a young player to watch, it's Alvaro Barreal. But just like Brendan Vasquez, it seems like Barreal could be gone heading into the beginning of the new season, or even he might be gone even before the season begin, because he's kind of on a bit of a holdout right now. He hasn't even reported to the preseason training for this team, and there is definitely a lot of talk that he of course would be gone. So I can't really put him as a young player to watch when he's probably going to be gone this season, and he's also on the older side. So yeah, besides that, I mean, there's really no players on the Cincinnati teams that is around the below like 24 or 23-year old age. Most of these guys are kind of in their prime, so really there's not really a young player player to watch, and that's okay because this is a Cincinnati team that has a lot of veteran present and a team that built a really strong core that should be a team that should compete not only in the Eastern Conference but should have a couple years of window of eventually winning the thing that they've been wanted to do for the last two seasons, and that of course is win MLS Cup. Now, in terms of what went right for this team, well, they won their first trophy with the Supporter Shield, and then of course Lucho Acosta winning the Landon Donovan MVP award, and then Pat Nolan and Chris Albright, right? Uh, let me pronounce that again. It's Pat Nolan and Chris Albright. Again, I'm battling this this bad voice that I have. Remarkable job at Cincinnati. I mean, what can you say about how they have just turned the fortune of the team around? Pretty much almost overnight. I mean, in this two season, and even going back to last year, the fact that that there was a lot unknown of how in the world is both of these guys going to really change the fortune of this team, because this has been kind of the lovable loser of MLS for the past couple of years, being a bottom feeder for the first free season. But the fact that they were able to change that and really just change that overnight, something absolutely magnificent. That is something we haven't really seen in this league. We don't usually see teams that have a remarkable turnaround. Well, we have seen it before, but not as crazy as what we have seen this season. What Pat Nolan and Chris Albright has done with this team. So, despite that, what went wrong for FC Cincinnati? Well, they lost to Columbus in the Eastern Conference Final, despite having a 2-0 lead in this game, and especially having a 2-0 lead with with final 15 minutes to go. And as a Minnesota United fans, I can definitely relate it to losing a 2-0 lead in the last 15 minutes of a conference final, and also understand the pain that FC Cincinnati fans basically have to deal with. But the other thing that they have to deal with in terms of this season is the fact that that was kind of a deja vu moment from what we saw just a couple of months ago too, because they also lost a 2-0 lead in a big game against Inter Miami in the U.S. Open Cup semifinal. And even though I know that was the game where everybody was thinking that, well, it seems like Inter Miami is going to make it, because that the script is definitely there for them to make it all the way. Cincinnati, they had Miami on the brinks, and they looked like they were going to eventually move on into the final and cause the upset and be the spoiler role, but didn't happen because they blew it. A 2-0 lead, eventually lose in a PK shootout, and pretty much it was the same case, although they did lose to Columbus, not in a PK shootout, but after extra time. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, I could have easily put Matt Miazga as a big disappointment, not because of the fact that he had a bad season. I mean, he had an incredible season this year, but what he did after the first round against the Red Bulls, like at that point, I even mentioned the fact that it's kind of the thing that kind of summarized Matt Miazga in a general, where he likes to play that villain role. He's kind of that villain role ever since he's made his stride with the U.S. men's national team, and also even arriving at FC Cincinnati. But unfortunately, he kind of took it a little too far. Not only getting a red card after basically decided to blow kisses to the Red Bulls fan after scoring a PK in the PK shootout, but also go to the referee room and got suspended 3 games as a result of that. I mean, you can't do that if you are, especially for a professional team. I mean, I can understand the frustration, but just storming into the referee room and just getting mad out of that, I mean, that's just no need for. And again, that might have cost this team chances of winning it all, because when you look at this Cincinnati team, I mean, I know they eventually did move on into the conference final, albeit a little bit shorthanded at the back. But when you're facing against a really good Columbus team, you really want to make sure you have your starting center back in that team, and especially with the way that they also suffer some injuries late in the season at the back. Nick Hagelin also suffer a season-ending injury at the end. They were really short at the back. This is where they really needed Matt Miazga, and they could have easily had him if it wasn't for that dumb mistake that he had made in that first round. And that, again, I know someone will say we'll never know if that will be the case. I do think that if they have him, they probably would have enough to beat to beat Columbus and at least slow down that lethal Columbus Crew attack that we saw in the Eastern Conference Final. So moving forward for this FC Cincinnati team, so obviously heading into this season, they're going to be favorites again in the Eastern Conference of winning the supporter shield and also potentially going all the way. Though, when you of course won the supporters shield in a season, I wonder whether or not if Pat Nolan is going to mainly focus on that again. Consider you already won the whole thing. Now their real focus is definitely focus on finish the job that was left undone last season, which is winning MLS Cup. And usually when that happens, we may see Pat Nolan maybe be a little bit less aggressive in terms of just not putting his regular starter in an MLS game every single game. And I don't think that's going to be the case because they're also are going to be in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, and depending on how far that they're going to go, they're going to have some of these games that they're going to punt away because they want to also win that competition. And we talk about teams that then lose in the playoffs, especially lose in a heartbreaking fashion, like what we saw with Cincinnati. A way to make up for that is win a trophy elsewhere, and the CONCACAF Champions Cup is definitely a competition that I think Cincinnati could be in serious business of potentially winning, and maybe be that next MLS team, joining the Seattle Sounders as a team to that win that competition. Although, even though I know, no, we all know who eventually is gonna win that competition, and especially the scriptwriter and also the FIFA president Infantino would really love the fact that that team from South Florida has Messi and his friends would love to win that competition. But besides that, the first point I mentioned, the moving forward about this team is that they already done some good business in terms of the offseason. They already got Robinson in, and even though I know Miles Robinson had a relatively disappointing season last year with Atlanta, I have a feeling he's going to bounce back heading into this season, and I think that's a really good signing, and especially winning the sweepstake too, because there's a lot of teams we're looking for the service of Miles Robinson, and then getting Corey Bear. That's also a good signing too, considering he had a really good season with Houston. I mean, actually, good is an understatement. He had a career season with the Houston Dynamo, and then they also are potentially going to get Pavel Butcher. And even though I know that is not official, it's close to being official, and that could also add in more depth in terms of the midfield. And I already mentioned, with them getting the likes of Wobodo and Pavel Butcher in there, yeah, that's going to be a very lethal kind of midfield dynamic duo. And that we know that Wobodo is one of the more important pieces to this Cincinnati team. Now you add in another guy that from what we heard could also be a really good midfield presence for this team, and also could be one of the best holding midfield in the league. Now all of a sudden this team can be dangerous again heading into the season. But obviously, the other thing moving forward for this team is what's going to happen with the Alvaro Barrio transfer saga. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen with him, him being on a holdout right now, and that, there's definitely some offer that is offering for Cincinnati to try to get the service of Alvaro Barrio, but it's also about whether or not if Cincinnati agree with the right price. I mean, after the season that he had last year, there's no doubt that they're not going to let go of Alvaro Barrio if the price is not right, and if they do eventually decide the right price and allow Barrio to leave, they need to find a replacement for him. And unfortunately, if they want to find a replacement for him, it's not going to be them using one of the DP spot, because they've already filled up all three DP, and that's also why last season, if you talk about all the non-DP player, Alvaro Barrio is definitely going to be right up there in terms of the top five non-DP player last season. So they definitely need to find a replacement for that, and also they need to find a replacement in the other back position, and the right wing back. I mean, there's also question in terms of Santiago Arias' future as well. There's rumor that he may be going back to Europe, so that might be another situation that they need to figure out, and also add depth in terms of that fullback position as well, because both of those fullback position and both of those wingback position, they're a little bit short in terms of the depth sheet. So that's going to be something that they're going to have to continue to address, and there's no doubt that I think they're going to address that, because they've done a great job in terms of this off season. replenish in terms of their core and adding some pieces, and that's kind of what you need to do if you're a team that is looking to try to compete for MLS Cup. You can't just keep running it back without adding some pieces and getting some upgrade, and that's is what Cincinnati, of course, are not doing in terms of running it back, but instead run it back and also adding more pieces so they can be stronger heading into this season. And once again, it's going to be a team that's going to be contending for not just the Eastern Conference round again, but also winning it all again heading into next season. But there you have it. That is pretty much it. Looking at FC Cincinnati in terms of their moving forward series episode. Let me know in the comments below what do you think of this video, and if you're a Cincinnati fan, what do you think went right, went wrong, and most importantly, moving forward, how is this team going to look heading into next season? But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.